Is our favorite tattooed politics wonk, John Stanton, Washington bureau chief at BuzzFeed. It's always great to have you with us at the table. But, you know, under any other circumstance, it seems like this trip would have a lot more attention. But because of the crisis in Ukraine and because there's just this general fatigue, I think, that we all have with foreign policy, this trip is not getting the attention and the excitement that it probably deserves. And you have, you know, folks in Asia saying, we keep getting screwed. Trips are canceled. You know, there's something that always seems to overshadow us.
Well, I think you're right, although I do think that this trip is really aimed at the Asian nations, right? I mean, I think for this administration, they have not focused that much on Asia, and, you know, Japan has been feeling very isolated, but of course that's partially because their economy's been in decline and they have lost their position sort of globally. And we have paid a lot of attention to China. Our allies don't like that very much. Here domestically, whatever, I think this is not really aimed at us. This is very much for both the governments and the populations in these countries where we have very long-standing ties, and there have been a lot of sort of bruised feelings, I think, over the last couple of years.
Yeah, but in terms of what will actually be accomplished in this trip, I have to think that the Ukraine-Russia situation does weigh very heavily on what those discussions will be. Some of these countries sort of nervous about what the U.S. would do if they had a territory, if they, you know, if China was aggressive in their territorial disputes with them. So what is the president sort of hoping to accomplish on reassuring them in that front?
Well, I think you know, definitely he's looking to reassure the allies there that we will stand by her. With this announcement on these disputed islands in Japan, I think he's making that very clear. I think he's also sending a bit of a signal to the Chinese, because there is some concern that they are going to become more closely tied to, you know, Russia supporting them in Ukraine or with Syria, the ongoing problem there. You know, by going and meeting with their rivals in the area, it's sending a very clear signal to them that, you know, we are not abandoning these people and that we will put pressure on your flank if we need to. And you know, there are some tensions right now with China over these things.
Yeah, when you look at some of these countries, particularly Japan, the ambassador we send there can make a great statement. Caroline Kennedy has only been there about 6 months, already considered a pretty big figure. Our own Peter Alexander was looking into this. Take a look at this package.
A large crowd, including his ambassador, greeted the president today in Tokyo. But that doesn't compare to the thousands who lined the streets here last fall to welcome Caroline Kennedy. Riding in a horse-drawn carriage, she was more dignitary than diplomat, completing the journey her father could not.
He had hoped to be the first United States president to visit Japan. So it's a special honor for me to be able to work to strengthen the close ties between our two great countries.
The once shy-eyed Kennedy lacked diplomatic experience, but brought the Japanese something many here value more: America's enduring connection to Camelot.
And you look at something like that, and part of what happens in the way we as a country look at these issues is we're very insular. Caroline Kennedy was a big story when she may have run for Senate. We don't talk about her a lot that much in our politics or our media, and yet she is playing a big cultural role and diplomatic role there in Japan, and by all accounts is seen as a positive part of our relationship with that nation.
Yeah, although, you know, again, I think other countries pay attention much more closely to what we say here than what we do to them. I mean, I was in China a few years ago, and Louis Gohmert did a Louis Gohmert kind of a thing on the floor about China, and in China it was huge news. In the United States, no one wrote a single story about it.
True.
But there, they really pay attention. And it's terrifying sometimes when you watch them and like, Louis Gohmert is very crazy, and you're like, well, it's just Louis Gohmert, don't worry about it. Yeah, you know, he's just like one member of the House, and but it makes, you know, it has a big impact on them. And I think, you know, Caroline Kennedy is definitely having a positive impact, although I would say that she is not a heavyweight on diplomatic front. She's not a heavyweight on economic issues. And that does, I think, signal a bit about our changing relationship with Japan. You know, in the 1980s...
More symbolic than anything else.
It is, and cultural, right? They are no longer the #2 economy in the world.
Right,
I think that is, that is very much an indication of that. And the sort of the change in how we view them and how we're going to work with them in the future.
One of the central thrusts of this trip is the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Can we get this thing finally done? And there's no guarantee that it will get done. There's a lot of hurdles, especially around beef, to get this done. If we can get it done, what do you think will be the value to Americans? The Washington Post is writing about this, saying if you're a business owner, this is going to be great. If your job is building cars, you should be worried. What do you think, John?
You know, I don't know. These kind of trade deals, both sides oftentimes will make these huge sweeping statements about them. Right? In, you know, NAFTA, we saw it with that. We see it with some of the big trade agreements. And oftentimes at the front end, you're going to see workers' wages go down. People may lose jobs. But then that also has had the impact of increasing wages in some of these countries and helping create that kind of pressure that has brought some jobs back in the United States or has created other opportunities. So, I mean, I think for your average American consumer, maybe not much of an impact. If you are a business owner, this could be a huge deal, though.
Yeah.
Or a worker, for that matter.
Yeah, very true. It's always great having you. Thank you so much for being with us, as always. And up next...